Hey, good morning and welcome to the CFB Super Show. I am your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85. We'll say it nice and loud and proud so our neighbors can hear us. It is week 3 of the college football season. We are out here riding high after a fantastic week 1 and a pretty darn good week 2. We sail into week 3 ready to rock and roll. Lots of things to talk about. We've got some player news to update on. I've got some aggregated ownership projections I'd like to share with you guys. And of course, I will be answering any and all questions, comments, and concerns you have, whether you're watching on YouTube or the X channel. Make sure it loaded there just fine. We are doing these ourselves now, and wouldn't you know it, I forgot to post it right. Anyways, I hope you guys are doing great. This is going to be an absolutely lovely week. I am feeling extremely positive about this week 3. There are a ton of chalky spots, but I think we're going to find that the overall ownership, at least on DraftKings, is somewhat spaced out outside of maybe 2 or 3 plays. That's always a good thing. We like seeing that. We like hearing that. And of course, there are some plays and or situations that I love and the rest of the industry doesn't. We live our life on an island. It's very, very cozy. It's nice this time of year, especially as we enter the winter months. So if you want to hang out with me on those islands, we do things like use Caleb Johnson there, Luke Haas, Super Mario, which we're going to go back to. We're inviting him back to the island. And this is a good island, not a bad island. I want to be clear about that. Appreciate you guys, everybody who's tuning in. Give some folks a chance to get in the door. My man Brett Belke is here, my underdog partner in crime. We are about 54 minutes to lock. This is going to be an interesting one, an entertaining one. The looking at the overall slate, like where our exposures are, looks like we're going to be very heavily towards the afternoon. There are a couple of early game plays that we are going to be on, but for the most part, we're going to have PMR. And that means if anyone blows the doors off the slate on the early, we'll be able to sit around, tinker and panic and tilt and do what we do, what you've come to know and expect from me and the Discord community over at FTN. Questions are rolling through on all platforms right now. We'll let those pile up. Actually, I'm going to take this moment to refill my water. Just 1 second. Get the blood pressure pumping. All right, we're going to start with our morning news dump. What we're going to talk about, let's go around the industry, around CFB. We're going to start with the Florida Gators and Coach Billy Napier, who is fighting for his job. He's fighting for his life out here. And he got a really good performance from one DJ Lagwule, the top freshman on the team, true freshman, played extremely well last week with Graham Mertz not playing. Yes, it was against Samford, but as a true freshman playing in a game setting, even if it's a community college school, which Samford is not that, they're better than community college, you're bound to see some mistakes. And the way that Lagway played in that game, throwing for nearly 500 yards and 3 touchdowns on 25 pass attempts in which he completed 18, you would think he earned the right to give it a shot. But I can kind of see both sides of it. Napier wanting to, ease his freshman into it, but at the same time, Napier may not have another season to figure this out, and they need wins as they stand 1-1 right now after they lost to brand favorite, I should say, Miami Hurricanes. But they have made the puzzling decision to start Graham Mertz. I don't want to be a Graham Mertz hater by any means, but having him start really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It reduces the upside for players like Elijah Badger and Eugene Wilson. Sticking in the same game, Eugene Wilson is a game-time decision, true game-time decision. He popped up on the injury report with a questionable tag on Tuesday. He did go fully through practice on Thursday, and now he has been relegated to game-time decision. Not really a play. We're looking at some projected ownership. He's way down the list, which is different from what it was week 1. I do like Elijah Badger to a degree, but I like him with Lagway, not so much with Graham Mertz. What I think will happen is Graham Mertz will start the game, have some difficulties, have some things not go his way. Perhaps Florida, gives up a lead, stalls out on offense, and then they're going to turn it over to Lagway. Texas A&M's defense is no joke. You saw the game against Notre Dame in which they did lose, but offensive production was not very prevalent in that game. So there's definitely some worries here, but I think that we ultimately see both quarterbacks, and there was even chatter from the coaching staff earlier in the week that the plan moving forward might be to run both quarterbacks. And as we know, it doesn't happen a ton, but we see some stubborn coaches, some programs who decide to run with the 2-quarterback system. And I don't have an exact figure. I haven't gone through and looked up all the teams that have done it over the last decade, but it works way less than it does work. I'd say less than 5% of the time. All it does is ruin chemistry amongst the team, hurts us for fantasy purposes because we don't get a full 4 quarters out of whatever quarterback we wanted to use, and the weapons with their chemistry report, all that stuff just goes down the tubes. So really all I want to mention about this game right now is the fact that Montrell Johnson is a really nice play. I think he's going to go under their own. Defensive is tough, but Montrell had a really nice game against Miami, which is a tough defense, and he's really consistent. One thing is for sure on this slate, the running backs are really nice. We're seeing a lot of, more than ever, when we started doing the 4 running back movement about 2 or 3 seasons ago when I came to FTN, everybody looked at us like we're morons. They probably still do. That's okay. I'm fine with that. But we're seeing more than ever this season, people embrace the 4 running back builds more than just our community. When you go through the contest list and look at some familiar names or even just randoms, you're seeing a lot of lineups with 4 running backs. And like I said, 2 years ago, that was taboo. Now people are starting to embrace that. And I feel very proud of us for that. And this is a slate, because I know I get asked every time, is it a 2-quarterback slate? Is it a 4 running back slate? It's probably 50-50. There are enough quarterbacks here that you can run 2, but there are far more running backs. There are at least 6, possibly 7 that I would be okay running. We're going to get into that with ownership here in a minute. Let's go to more news dumps. The morning dump. We should start making some graphics here, really trick out the show. LSU wide receivers. So Hilton expected to miss once again. Doesn't really affect too much. Weren't really looking to that game anyhow, but we are expecting Kyle Parker to return, who has missed last game at least, went out early in the USC game. He is expected to be back dealing with an elbow issue, while Chris Hilton is dealing with the ankle issue and not expected to play here in a tough environment, tough game. If you're looking at the early pre-game shows on ESPN, which I know a lot of us don't watch ESPN much these days, except for when there are games on, but the South Carolina crowd is raw, ruckus, and ready to go. Not an envious situation for that LSU team whatsoever, but Hilton out, Parker in, part of the news there. Luther Burden expected to play. He was dealing with a mystery ailment and illness. So nothing really there that we need to concern ourselves with. I'm also not using him. I don't think multiple people or most people in the industry aren't. So do what you will with that information. Tawi Walker for Wisconsin is expected to play and or be available. He's not on the injury list. Wisconsin's going to need all hands on deck going up against a very tough Alabama defense. There's really no middle ground here. The people I've talked to either think that Alabama is going to control this one from start to finish, or that Wisconsin's going to be able to slow things down enough to keep their explosive offense off the field. I personally think Bama kind of just takes this game and Terminator style production and pace. But having Tawi Walker back is definitely a plus for Wisconsin. Ches Malusi and his 2.2 YPC on average certainly isn't going to be breaking any ankles with his carry style. Walker helps. That's the main injury news to know for this particular slate. Just go through here. Kyle Williams is full go for Wazoo. He had left the game briefly last week, came back and scored a touchdown after. Expectation there is that he is going to be fine and will play full. Faison for Notre Dame back. Maybe bump down our guy Chris Mitchell. Notre Dame and Purdue, as our boy HB Cards in the Discord said this morning. It's kind of just a game where it's feeling like, what about us? Every other game being talked about across the industry and in our Discord. Nobody talking about Notre Dame, Purdue. I hate that game, but those are exactly the type of games that win a GBP when they end up going, multiple overtimes, and maybe vintage Riley Leonard performance is in the air. I wouldn't mind a Devin Maccabee ham sandwich, if you will, simply for best ball underdog purposes. Later, actually, it's early. I think at FanDuel early. Texas Tech, Taj Brooks expected to return against North Texas. Been questionable with an arm injury. Missed last week's game. Taj Brooks, of course, a star. Texas Tech offense without Taj Brooks was ugly. Very, very ugly. All right. What's up, Tony? My man, any best bets for today? Well, you saw the show on Thursday. I remember talking to you, but we'll go through. These may have changed slightly. Bear with me if they did. Saturday mornings are a very busy time for me, but the listed bets, featured bets in the free piece that I did on Tuesday, FIU plus 5.5, which I believe has since gone to plus 5 against Florida Atlantic. Southern Florida minus 11.5 is what we got it at. Then it bounced to minus 11. Now I saw it on DK at minus 12. So bouncing around there, but I like South Florida and FIU to cover against Southern Miss and FAU. Also like Memphis plus 7 against FSU. I did see that go to plus 6.5 on DraftKings. Virginia money line, once again, my man Colin Dara going up against the Terps. And then I'm taking the Pittsburgh money line. We got a little bit of, it's a taboo word to say, so I'll whisper it. Look, when it came to last week's Pittsburgh game, they trailed by, to Cincinnati for 3.5, 3.75 did pull out the win. I do like Pittsburgh to beat West Virginia for what it's worth. And then I have some prop bets, the super prop bets, and there are 3 that I am really, really high on and love. Caleb Johnson, 100 plus rushing yards. Yes, we're going back to Caleb Johnson. Malachi Fields, 100 plus receiving yards. I don't need to go too in depth. We talked about it on Thursday, but Fields is going up against a Terp secondary that got obliterated by Skylar Bell of UConn to the tune of 5 for 141. And then we saw Nick Marsh of Michigan State absolutely detonate and have his breakout game as he had nearly 200 receiving yards. What did they have in common with Malachi Fields? WR1s have been eating against the Terps. Expect a huge game from Malachi Fields today. 100 plus receiving yards. It's plus 190, but it's actually, well, if you're looking at it now, it looks like it's jumped up to plus 205. So you're getting some additional value there. And then one other prop, just to really ram it in there. Darian Mensah of Tulane, 250 passing yards at plus 400. If you really want to get crazy and you think he's going to go for 275 plus, they offer it at plus 700. I'm probably the only one in the world, not probably, I am the only one in the industry right now that is going to be talking about Darian Mensah and Tulane stack. It worked with Super Mario last week. Will it work this week? We're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it and do ownership, but those are the bets that I am on. Tony, thank you for being here. Thanks for checking in. Let's get into some roster ship notes here. Let's pull up FanDuel. So I have 2. I have two. So FanDuel. All right. And remember, projections for us are a work in progress. We need a little bit more data before I feel comfortable really pressing them out there. We are doing some aggregate stuff when it comes to roster ship from a few sources. But let's start with quarterbacks on FanDuel, highest ownership. Let's pull this up the right way. All right. Garrett Green, no surprise there. Garrett Green, one of the highest owned projected quarterbacks on FanDuel. Shedeur Sanders, maybe a bit of a surprise there, but Sanders, bounce back spot here for Colorado. I guess I can maybe get that. And bear in mind too, these are obviously not going to be exact. This is just what we think based off of industry talk and a few other sources of ours. John Mateer coming in as the 3rd Anthony Colandera, which to me and my money, if Virginia was on this slate, not the later slate, which Jake Kuchek will have an article for, I would be all in on Colandera. I was last week on both DK and FanDuel on those later slates. I love Virginia. I'm a really big fan of Colandera and Fields. He is a absolute fantasy stud. I think he's going to put up huge numbers this year. So Colandera being the fourth highest projected quarterback, I kind of feel like that's probably wrong. I think he should be up there and, maybe slightly behind Garrett Green. That's how high I am on him. And then fifth, we have John Mateer. Now remember, this is FanDuel. At running back, Ollie Gordon. He's expensive, and I know people are a little bit worried. His ownership is not projecting that much on DraftKings, but still is on FanDuel, where touchdowns are very valuable. I can understand that a lot. Cam Cook, also in the top 5. Nate Noel. I have a blurb to talk about Nate Noel before we're all said and done. Jonah Coleman and Desmond Reed. At wide receiver, our top 5 highest owned projected wide receivers: Brennan Presley, LeJohntay Weister, Travis Hunter, and Giles Jackson. And people have been asking me, why Jackson over Boston? You're so high on Boston. I love Denzel Boston. To me, he is the best receiver on the Huskies team. Jackson is, and I wrote this in our article yesterday, Jackson is cheaper on FanDuel. Play him there. Boston, cheaper on DraftKings. Play him there. But you're not inclined to do so, especially if you want to play Jonah Coleman. You don't have to. I think that this game will be a little bit more of a defensive struggle than people probably realize. Maybe more like a 20-17 type of game. All right, so that's the FanDuel ownership. And by the way, Rock Taylor, 4-9 on FanDuel. We did a tight end talk on Thursday for FanDuel. Promised that I would talk about cheaper wide receivers on FanDuel for the sub that asked. Rock Taylor at 4-9 opens up a lot of doors on FanDuel, possibly getting you to Malachi Fields, who is projecting way lower owned on FanDuel than he should be, simply because he's priced so high. Shout out to Jay Craig. He is the one that asked. But Rock Taylor really, really opens those doors. So that is where you can get your value. And then, of course, the tight ends that we talked about, like Bauman. Over on DraftKings, let's get the DraftKings projected ownerships up. At quarterback, Garrett Green. What a surprise. Garrett Green should be one of the highest owned quarterbacks. We know it's a great matchup against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh games, what a difference a year makes. Their offense is fantastic. This is turning into a fantasy, bonanza, their program, the way they play and the way their defense is playing. So no surprise to me that Garrett Green projects as the highest owned. Next, we have Eli Holstein on the other side of that game. No shocker there. A little bit surprised slightly, but I guess I shouldn't be. But John Mateer projecting third highest. He has that rushing upside that he showed against Texas Tech. He is playing a tougher defense against Washington. I do think they're going to try to throw the ball more. I feel like the Huskies are going to do a lot to keep things in front of them. So Mateer's rushing ability is, to me, hamstrung a little bit, but I'm also extremely biased towards the purple and gold. And I think the Cougars are, one step above the scum of the earth, with Oregon being scum of the earth for what it's worth. Let's go down the list here. Dylan Gabriel, fourth, which is, it's at this, the 4th, 5, and 6 spots are all pretty close. You've got like Alan Bowman, Arnold, Dylan Gabriel, that range. Don't particularly love any of those options, but that is where you're looking on DraftKings. At running back, no surprise, Desmond Reed, the highest owned running back on the slate, highest owned player, until he gets priced appropriately like he was on FanDuel, much higher there in the 10K range. Until he gets above 7K, you're going to see exceptionally high rostership on Desmond Reed, and it might take something like him going over 8K. And this is kind of similar to what we saw at Ollie Gordon. Now, granted, they're different types of runners, as Jake indicated on Thursday, but breaking out early in the season, having these huge monster fantasy games, the price shoots up and you just keep rostering a guy until further notice. And that's where we are at with Desmond Reed. Next up, Nate Noel. Then you have Jonah Coleman. Rocket Sanders is projected as the 4th highest owned running back in that 4.9 price tag. Elite South Carolina defense that's going to want to keep LSU's offense off the field. I think Sanders could have 30 touches. Now, whether that's a few targets, carries, however it works out, I am predicting 30 touches there for Rocket Sanders. See, and then rounding out the top 5 and he's pushed up a little bit since yesterday. Mekhi Hughes, it was Montrell Johnson between those two. Mekhi Hughes, similar situation to Rocket Sanders, just a ton of volume. Even though Oklahoma's rush defense, I wouldn't advise it. It's been very good. He's not on my list, but I always love Mekhi Hughes, and I have a lot of love for Tulane, in case you didn't know. At wide receiver, these are what we're looking at. Brennan Presley projecting as one of the highest owned on the slate. He has been absolutely smashing it, has clearly been Bowman's number one receiver. The targets and production is very condensed on Oklahoma State. We know Ollie Gordon's going to get the carries, and we know Brennan Presley, Deshaun Stribling, and Rashad Owens are going to get all the targets. There's not a lot of room for variety out there. It's just those four. Interesting note for Presley, he's playing his brother, Braylon, at Tulsa, but no big deal there. Second, we have Trent Walker, who is the Oregon State value piece. Now, Oregon State's going to try to run the ball a lot. I don't particularly love getting much exposure to this game. I get it because Walker is so cheap at 4-4, and he has been, when the quarterbacks are throwing, it's typically been to him, but their quarterback play is so atrocious. But he is projecting over 25% owned at this point, Trent Walker. Third, we have Chris Hudson, again, because he's cheap and gives you exposure to that Apple Cup game. Then we have, it kind of surprised me here, but we have Cortez Braham, who's a little bit cheap, but also getting all those targets for Nevada. And then rounding out the top 5 highest owned is Camden Benjamin, who definitely over the last 24 to 36 hours has grown on me more. He is the number one target there for Tulsa, but still, I'm not super keen on any Tulsa guys. Oklahoma State defensively, they're really rough. They're supposed to be making some changes with the packages that they have, but right now nothing works on defense. I want to be able to take advantage of their rush defense, but their pass defense isn't very good either. All right, so that is the ownership. What's up, Day? Tony, do I think Tulane can cover? Absolutely. What are they? They're plus 13 most places. Definitely think so. I'm more so looking at the over. It was sitting about 48. Let me just double check here because things change exceptionally fast on Saturdays, as we know. But the total was the one that I was really trying to attack. And a few times so far this year, we've looked at some totals and been like, that seems to be very off. And this is certainly one that I am questioning why it's this low. I know Oklahoma's defense certainly solid. Tulane, maybe the one game against Kansas State was an anomaly. I don't think it was, but that total sitting there at 48. I do prefer the over 48 as opposed to the straight bet on Tulane. But either way, yes, I think Tulane's going to make a game of this. I really, really do. Did I miss the DK core? So we had our cores that we gave on Thursday. Typically, I might update them as we get into Saturday. Right now, the 3 players that I am absolutely locking in, no questions asked on DraftKings: Desmond Reed, Mario Williams, who we were all in on last week at 0.9% ownership. He did quite well. I'm going right back to that well. His price went up 600, but I don't care. And then second is actually Darius Taylor, which may surprise some people. And I'm kind of shocked too. I'm shooketh, as they say, looking around the industry. And this is going to lead into the Nate Noel talk. Darius Taylor, before the season, everybody and their mom very high on Darius Taylor. Great player, going to be, this workload in a Minnesota offense that favors their running backs. We could see a Mo Ibrahim-like situation. Didn't play the first week, in a blowout game last week, and suddenly the talk of the industry is, well, he's sharing a carry load. He's not going to be the bell cow after all. There's talk that they want Brosmer to throw the football more. Marcus Major's going to get a sizable workload. They've got Bangera. They've got Mangum for short yardage. Like, this was the reason why I took Darius Taylor's under season total for rushing yards, because yes, there are a lot of running backs, and they went in the portal and they pulled some guys out that I just don't believe are, 1, getting a huge NIL package, and 2, came to Minnesota not to get touches. So that's what I'm in agreement with what people are saying there in that regard. However, with Taylor missing that first game and coming in the second, I think they are going to give him a chance to rattle Nevada, especially in the first half. We may see more spaced out carries as the game goes on, but those series, I truly believe, is going to be a healthy and heavy dose of Darius Taylor. I think he ultimately pushes towards 20-ish touches, if not more. And then there's also a lot of talk about getting the running backs more involved in the passing game. And we saw that from Darius Taylor against Rhode Island last week when he caught 4 passes for nearly 50 yards. So that type of stat line, once again, if he rushes for 50 to 60 yards at minimum, and I think there's upside for 100, clearly, a touchdown and 4 or 5 receptions, we're looking at a really, really solid line at his price point. You even see Marcus Major last year, 4 receptions for 21 yards. So they are throwing to the running backs more, and that's something that is supposed to continue. So I am heavily invested in Darius Taylor. And when the slate first came out, and even into Thursday, the beginning of Thursday night show, I wasn't quite sure how much my exposure was going to be. I'm Ron Burgundy. How's it going, man? Good to see you. I'm just messing with you. But I'm really, really high on Darius Taylor, and it surprises me that he's not projecting higher. So I'm fine with it. We did mention the 6K range at both wide receiver and running back is extremely valuable. A lot of viable options. Taylor sitting there. I mean, he threw down like almost effortlessly against Rhode Island. He threw down 21 fantasy points. Let's say he scores twice in this game at 6'2" and breaks 100. You're looking at a potential, slate breaking score. He's in there with Montrell Johnson, Jonah Coleman. Like there's a bunch of running backs in that, 6 to upper 6K range. Mario Anderson, Desmond Reed, who are all going to be on. You have Mekhi Hughes. There's a lot of good looks there, but to me, Darius Taylor just makes the most sense, right? So he is the part of the DraftKings core. We'll stick with running backs here. Get your questions in because we're gonna go for 20 more minutes. Didn't want to do that. Song so good, had to hear it twice. Ollie Gordon. Right now on DraftKings, we're looking at about a 25-ish% mark on Ollie Gordon. Now, week 1, we were all the way in on Ollie Gordon. He ended up being about 40%, and he effectively murder, death, killed 60% of lineups that didn't use him on week 1. It was great. Everybody overcorrected and played him into the tune of 75% in week 2. Oklahoma State kind of, fell apart there for a bit. They did eke that one out, but Ollie Gordon only had 17 carries, had a hugely, unappealing game and an offensive game, right? Like if we were Karens, we would be calling the manager about his performance. And I think the good thing here is, as people are going to once again look at this similar to how they did in week 1, the price is so high. Like even in our Discord, I'm hearing a lot of, the price is so tough to get to for Ollie Gordon. It shouldn't be really that tough. We have the value. We've provided it. We have cheap receivers. We have cheap running backs. We've got Rocket Sanders. We're making a conscious decision to not pay for one of the top priced quarterbacks. At least I am. So if you're not paying for Ollie Gordon, you really have to look at and say, who am I paying for? Because you're not paying for Burden. You're maybe not, maybe you're going Milrow, I guess, but probably not Gabriel, not Jackson Arnold, not Tez Johnson. I like Burks, but I don't love him for DFS at that price. So, I guess more of a balanced approach perhaps makes sense if you're fading Ollie Gordon, but the idea of him being less than 30% owned, a spot in which I believe they will make a very conscious, conceited effort to get him the ball early and often, and somewhere closer to that 30-plus touch mark that we saw in week 1 against South Dakota State. 25-plus carries, 3-plus targets. I am certainly not ashamed or afraid of playing Ollie Gordon. And he is a player that, again, not going to twist your arm and force you to play him, but it's going to be one of those situations like in the past when Justin Fields was around the collegiate game and you had to make that decision each week because Ohio State's blowing the doors off people. Do we fade Fields and his 2.5 quarters of play, or do we play him? And every time you faded Fields, think about how you felt when he put together 30 fantasy points after 2 quarters and ended up breaking the slate. And it was very, very painful. I'm not saying Ollie Gordon's throwing a 30 down in the first half, but he's going to end up playing the entire game. Tulsa's just competitive enough to keep the starters playing for the majority of the game. Obviously, the key to their success runs through Ollie Gordon. And again, if it turns into a blowout, that's only going to work to the favor of Ollie, because when you look at the running back depth behind him, they won't be using those guys heavily until later in the fourth quarter. So I just expect a lot of Ollie Gordon there. Whether that ends up being 2-yard runs every time, I don't know, but the touches are going to be there. I'm just going to keep following Ollie Gordon for now. Once we get to even tighter pricing, which the slates are already, you can see how tighter this slate is. We'll have to really make that decision and say, oh, Ollie Gordon's in a horrible matchup. Can we get away from him? Then yeah, that'll be different. But this is just the tea leaves, and the stars are aligning in such a way that Ollie Gordon's ownership is depressed. He has one of the highest upsides on the slate, and we know his workload is safe and secure, barring any sort of injury. Knock, knock, knock. All right, now let's talk about Nate Noel and Missouri. This is the spot that may get me into some trouble. I am not super high on Missouri for DFS purposes today, as the rest of the industry is, and that could be a real mistake. It's not that I don't think they'll win. I'm going in the season, I have bets on Missouri to be a playoff team and this, that, and the other. But it's the running back situation that worries me. And Nate Noel is projecting high owned chalk on both sites. He's priced at only 5.6 on DraftKings. And the argument is basically, the arguments around the industry is he, the true RB1, which the snap counts say yes. And if not, then is it a hot hand situation with Marcus Carroll? And then again, I say to you, these guys transferred in. NIL packages, probably decent, but neither probably commanded huge NIL packages. So they came here with the idea they're going to get carries. And it just seems like it would be I would be shocked if Noel comes in and just totes the rock 20 plus times and Carroll gets like 5 carries. And you guys know that if it happens, I'll gladly raise my hand and say, you know what, I got this one wrong. That's one of the things, we'll pat ourselves on the back when we get it right, and we will own it when we get it wrong. I think that if Carroll comes in, busts off a 7-yard run here, 11 here, touchdown, maybe he makes a play here, there, whatever, I think we could see a lot more Carroll than people probably even realize. Snap counts, Noel has him dominated. He does, but their carries and their total touches so far have been within 3 or 4 each of the first 2 games. And granted, their first 2 games haven't been that competitive. But I really am just having a hard time believing, grasping, and taking this idea that Nate Noel is a bell cow and he's going to go out there and absolutely murk. There's a chance both of them perform quite well here, especially if Missouri gets out to an early lead and just wants to run the football and keep Castellanos off the field on the other end. There's realistically a timeline out there where both put up 20 plus fantasy points. But with the amount of great running backs on this slate, and one like Noel, who has some question marks, at least with what are those touches actually going to be, and his ownership projecting well above 35-40%. And by the time Locke gets here, we may even see him at 50%. I am going to be lower on him than the rest. Again, could absolutely slap me in the face, but and they're different prices, but it's Darius Taylor versus Nate Noel. I think that's going to be one of the big points of contention there for me and how this slate works out. So that is where I'm at with Nate Noel. I see Hunter was asking about it. Hopefully that answered your question. It was definitely something I wanted to get to because it is a very tricky situation, but I'm underweight on him on Underdog in Battle Royale, and I'm underweight in DFS. It could get ugly. Is it too hard to play Ollie on DK today? Easy on FanDuel? No, you can make it work. You can make it happen. Good to see you, Jamie. Thanks for checking in, my man. With Ryan Williams for Bama so far, need 2 wide receivers for DK Main for 91 combined. I would get into if you want to go with the chalk play of Trent Walker there, you want to go with the tight end from Tulane, Bauman, who I'm very high on, is near min price. That gives you a pretty solid range to work. Like a Stribling. Let's see. Camden Benjamin and Bauman would be a good way to go there. That's probably how I would work it with what the prices that you got there. All right, let's keep on moving along here. Market seems on Hudson a lot. Didn't seem like you guys loved him Thursday. He was our favorite Cougar. We liked him a lot more than Kyle Williams. And at 4.9, he was a call out for me. So he's definitely a value to get exposure to. He's not a priority by any means, but he's definitely going to be in some lineups for me. So if you like him and you're kind of on the fence with it, you could certainly pull the trigger there. Best 6.2 or lower wide receiver have Benjamin in now. He's talking DK. You assuredly have Mario Williams in already. You didn't mention it, so I will say if you don't have Mario, he would be my answer. If you do have Mario, Kanata Mumfield would be a very good shot. You can play him with Desmond Reed. We know multiple pieces can and will and has worked out just fine. If you want to get somewhat cute, Jeremiah Hunter of Washington, he's going to be in the mix and involved. You also have a, decent shot with like a Jeremy Bernard of Bama, Ryan Williams of Bama. So that's kind of the group you can pick from and look there. Do you think Connor Wegman plays? I do. So for what it's worth, if he was not going to play, I honestly think they would have like either left him questionable or dropped him down to doubtful. I know that, we all are kind of, waiting on that news. I figured we wouldn't get it before the first wave of games locked. Like that was just a pipe dream. We're all, of course, looking at Marcel Reed on DK at 4.5K, the min price for quarterbacks if Wegman can't go. I am playing a quarterback from the later part of the slate, which I believe most are. So we will get that news before those games lock and be able to make swaps. My man Brett Belke made a good point in Discord earlier that this is a slate that you're going to want to be, engaged in. You're going to have to, depending on how the first few games go and how that news breaks, there's going to be some swapping happening, and make sure that you do basic stuff that sometimes gets forgotten. Play your later guys in flex, super flex, give yourself more swap opportunities. But I do think Connor Wegman plays. Worst case scenario, he plays and then can't go. They put in Reed, and then none of them got used anyways. So I would like to be able to use Marcel Reed, though, for what it's worth. Good afternoon. Thank you for everything you do. Oh, yep, just answered that one for you. We do. All right. 7K last man in. I don't know if that's flex. I don't know if that's a flex or not. So let's just assume it is. And without being able to see your lineup, it makes it a little bit tough. I would say like Jonah Coleman would be my look there. I assume you have like the core pieces that we've talked about and been engaged with, but Jonah Coleman would be my answer there. This is a good segue, but let's answer a few questions. Mario Anderson or Darius Taylor? I love Mario Anderson this week. Love. Have a ton of equity on him in Underdog Battle Royale, but straight up for DFS purposes, I am going Darius Taylor. And then we have Ollie Gordon, Alex Bowman, my guy from Tulane, versus Brendan Presley, Brendan Presley, and Jonah Coleman, who I also love. I do lean the stars and scrubs, like we're playing a game of basketball DFS here. I'm just on Ollie, and I think the value path through Tulane makes too much sense. So I go Ollie Bowman, but I can almost assure you that every other content provider in the industry would be saying Presley Coleman. And I do want to throw it out there with the caveat, in case this is your first time watching the Super Show, we don't fancy ourselves hot take artists or anything like that. We don't play guys for leverage just because they're going to be low owned. It just happens that way. Oftentimes we do we always do our independent research. We don't do anything with, other people talking in industry chatter. Like, I save that for the end. I do all my own work. And then on Thursday after the show, then I start looking at some other stuff. After my article comes out, then I really start taking a peek at what other people are doing. And it just happens more often than not that players I'm really high on are lower owned compared to the rest. So that's just one of those things. I'm hoping we can keep it going. We have had some tremendous success. Caleb Johnson last week, Luke Haas from Arkansas, Super Mario way back in week 1, way back. Jake had the sick Ty Felton call at low rostership during some of the smaller weekday slates that started week 1. Bauer Sharp of Oklahoma got a touchdown for us. We've just done very, very well. Jaden Williams the other night. So we've been running hot on these calls, and I'm hoping that continues into today because okay, sorry, I was reading something about Mensa. This is a good segue. I'm hoping it continues because I have another one for us, and it is the remember Aaron Rodgers, the discount double check, right? The discount double check. Our version of that is today, and we're gonna go with the Tulane triple stack. It is happening. Let's go. Yes, Tulane. Nobody else in the world on Tulane. You know I'm going to play Mario Williams. He's in the core, but I'm also going to play a couple of others. And yes, I'm going to pull the trigger in my main lineup. Last week, I was literally pissed at myself. Been doing this a long time, playing DFS and fantasy for, as long as it started back in Draft Street, 2012, all that good stuff. Still waffle. I mean, we waffle, we get swayed. It happens. I was all over Caleb Johnson. I should have just went 100%, but then I started thinking maybe I should diversify, maybe split him. I ended up splitting him. Obviously pissed. I told myself, win or lose, I have to continue to trust my read, my research. Just go with it. If I lose, I lose. But if I win, then I'm going to be at the top of the leaderboards on this play, and I would rather lose with my own research, my own plays, my own line that I drew in the sand than to lose with other people's plays, advice, whatever. So you can always count on me to give you honest and actionable takes and the reasons why. It will never be, I'm playing this guy because he's low owned, or I'm playing this guy because he's going to be high owned. I will never give you content like that. And I think that's why you guys keep sticking around watching me do what I do and be crazy here on air. So with that being said, we have Mario Williams at 4%. This is ownership we're talking here. Alex Bowman, the tight end for Tulane, who has absolutely just been ripping and running. It's been 2 games here. Tulane this is going to be such a fun team. I honestly think that Darian Mensah is going to get pilfered next year to a P4 team, but he loves his tight end. 4 receptions this year on 7 targets. 3 of those receptions have gone for touchdowns. He has been a very reliable option. We know Mario Williams after what he did last week. We knew what he did after week 1. Those 2 are fantastic options. You can play Mario on his own in your lineup. You could play Bowman on your own. It sets up just like Luke Haas of Arkansas did last week. Low owned, touchdown upside, maybe even better. And then the quarterback play, Darian Mensah. And that is the one that is going to separate us from the masses. When I look at the quarterback field on DraftKings, up top, we have Jackson Arnold, we have Dylan Gabriel, Jalen Milroe. There's really expensive options, and they're playable. They are, Milroe being the most. But the way I want to build, I'm just not getting there. The second tier, you've got, Mateer, you've got Will Rogers, Nussmeier, Bowman, guys like that. Garrett Green is going to be very chalky. Seth Hennigan, who I do like as a GPP look. But none of those are really calling to me. And I'm with the 4 running back lineup that I'm going to ultimately have. I'm looking at Darian Mensah, who's sitting there at 6.1K. Blowout, he put up 18, which wouldn't be the worst in the world at 6'1". He threw dimes all over the field against Kansas State last week. It was about 22 DK points at 6'4". If you put up that today, it wouldn't be the end of the world. What he gets us is the 4 running backs that we want. A upper tier wide receiver if we want it. there's a good chance he puts up, 18 to 22 fantasy points, but might Hennigan do that? Might Garrett Green do that? Some of the higher price guys, Jackson Arnold, how much more upside do they have? Their ceilings are clearly higher, but are they actually going to be hitting those at a consistent rate today? Darian Mensah, I retweeted several times 4 of his passes from last game that, I mean, if you like to watch film or, study replays, whatever, I encourage you to watch those because they will have you absolutely slack-jawed, mouth-watering, salivating because this kid is making some pro-level throws. Redshirt freshman, he has a lot of growing and improving to do. He's going to make mistakes. He's probably going to make a mistake today. But I think 35 to 40 pass attempts are in his future. If he completes 20 to 25, a few of them are going to be deep balls to Mario. He's got Dante Fleming back and healthy. He's, making things happen, another deep threat. And then you have his big, bad tight end who is able to just own the middle of the field, will catch a touchdown today. I'm almost certain of that. Keep his touchdown streak going. So the 2-lane triple stack of Darian Mensah, Alex Bowman, and Mario Williams, there it is right there. I'm not afraid. My mind and my body are ready. This is going to take us to the promised land. I think Darian Mensah has a huge game. I have a massive, massive potential payout on that Mensah passing prop, Caleb Johnson rushing prop, and Malachi Fields receiving prop all parlayed together. We could be looking at a very, very big week. I feel exceptionally good about this week, as good as I did during week 1. And I know that we're going to have a lot of success as a community and as a group. Green screens and window trips galore. We are 10 minutes away from lock. I am going to start to head out here. I appreciate you guys very, very much. One last question from Day, WR 3600 or less. Alex Bowman of the Green Wave. That is the answer. That is who you want. Thank you very much, guys. Get out there and finish up your lineups. Let's do it. Big things ahead. Make sure you stay in the Discord and check in often before the second set of games so we can have that Texas A&M news. I am out of here. See you back Thursday night for the Week 4 breakdown of the CFB slate. Appreciate it, guys. Let's do it big. Go Huskies. Woof, woof.